What's up guys? Lugia VSTAR has been dominating recently in both the Japanese system and online tournaments on Limitless, so here are my opinions on the most effective methods to beating Lugia VSTAR, and some of the supposed counters that I personally think aren't as strong as they are supposed to be at beating Lugia. So enjoy the video guys, and if you enjoy, drop a like, drop a sub, you got anything to ask, anything to say, drop a comment, I'll read it, so yeah, enjoy. Alright, what's up guys? We have 9 decks here I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how all of them tackle Lugia, how they're tackling the matchup, what they should be playing, and yeah, how lists are being made to build around Lugia, what decks they're running. So we're going to start here, we're going to start with Giratina. Yeah, so this deck, it runs Temple. So the thing about Temple is that you have to play it like with good timing, because the thing is, if you just play temple and you just give your opponent the turn, or like if you're not actually like doing something with the temple, it's not going to be good. The main use of temple is actually to stop the V-Guard energy. So especially for this deck, your lost impact can start to knock out Lugias, and that's going to be super important for you to win the trade. So yeah, that's how this deck is doing it. And so one of Lugia's weaknesses is that it definitely can lose prize trades. So if um, you go like for second on turn two, Lugia's second turn, then they're not always going to hit Serena on your Giratina. If they hit that, it can be rough for you. But if they don't, then at that point, you go in with your Giratina, you lost impact. You do it three. You attack 3 times. You win the game, right? You get 3 Giratina set up. Attack with them all. You win. Lost impact to lost impact into Star Requiem or something along those lines. Also, if you did damage to Cramorant earlier, it becomes a lot easier. So, yeah, another strategy that this deck can use against them is if you use Greninja into Sableye, you can use Greninja to put 90 on both their Aerodactyls, which they have to have in play, and then you can Sableye and put damage on both of them to knock them out, and that is, two attacks for, 2 prizes, which is pretty good against Lugia, keeping yourself in the prize trade, which is really important against Lugia. You just kind of have to stay ahead. Get ahead, stay ahead is sort of the idea against Lugia. You're not always going to have that, and sometimes just racing with Giratina, but yeah, to make sure that you absolutely can win the race in this deck, you got to be running those temples to stop their V Guard energy above all things. Because the thing about Lugia is the temple doesn't affect them that much. Like they just discard the stadium at the end of their turn, and unless the 2 real big special energies you block is the V Guard and the powerful. So you can get temple at the end of the game to try and stop Radiant Charizard, um, but that's sort of So yeah, because they always have the pumpkin, they have their vacuums, they have their own collapse stadiums, and their collapse stadium can be very useful for them for discarding damage Pokemon if that's your strategy. Especially if you're going for Greninja, they just collapse stadium and Arceus off the board. So yeah, a lot of things to keep in mind there, and to think about. So the second deck we're going to be talking about is Mew, bottom left, 2 Forest Seal Stones. Yeah, so this is a list that I've seen, and the thing about Mew is that right now it seems like Lugia has a really tough time with Melwetter, because Lugia, like, it's not that easy for them to find their basics. They don't run enough search cards to the point where they can actually get a ton of basics on turn 1, so if they go first, you're not threatening the Melwetter with a rope to absolutely blow them out, or even just killing their active. As long as you can take 2 prizes with Melwetter on turn 1, they're going to really struggle regardless of what's going on. And the thing is, if Lugia, if they're only Lugia and play dies, on turn 1 they literally lose. So like having the increased odds of just exodiating them basically at the beginning of the game, especially now that it's even more likely with the Forest Seal Stone, which acts as a computer search. If you know that card, it's a better computer search. You can use it later, you can choose when you use it. It's 1 per game, but like, yeah, it's just a ridiculous card. And yeah, that's how Mew tackles Lugia, just hard and fast with the Melwetter, high boss, just absolutely target them. You have the tablets, you have the belts. This deck's playing a path because you can get that on turn 1. Sometimes it helps, but yeah, path mainly for other matchups as well. So the third thing we're going to talk about is the mirror and how Lugia can tackle the Lugia mirror, because with the strength of Lugia, beating Lugia in the mirror is absolutely vital. So I've got a list here that's running this Zapdos, and it really seems like it's crucial in your Lugia list. You know what um, text you're running. So like running there's a couple that are important. There's the Zapdos, the Raikou, the Manaphy, and the Dunsparce, because they all sort of counter each other in a weird way. Where the Raikou, if they don't have Manaphy, is really good, and if they don't have Dunsparce, is amazing. If they don't have either, it's incredible. It just does so much. But yeah, because it can kill Yveltal, could put damage on another Lugia, which is really helpful. So the issue with Raikou is it's really hard to use. So this Zapdos is less hard to use and also has a little bit more utility in being able to snipe the bench. So that's why it's being played in this list. This list not playing Capture Energies, but so a little bit less consistent. But yeah, teching for the mirror with the Zapdos to punish those that are not running Dunsparce. But I think we'll start to see more Dunsparce online. Dunsparce hasn't been played as much because it is, pretty situational and pretty hard to use and pretty hard to know when to use as well, especially in the mirror. It's really hard to know if you're supposed to have Dunsparce down or not because these lightning attackers are quite niche. So yeah, that's what I'd say about the Lugia mirror. Alright, the next deck, we're going to look at a Lost Box deck with Rayquaza. So the thing about Lost Box is that the traditional Lost Box with the Radiant Zard and no Mirage Gates is really seeming to... it's definitely a good deck, and I think there's adaptations that deck can make as well with maybe Magma Basin or something like that to adapt to Lugia. But that deck's seeming to struggle because Collapse Stadium, being able to discard Lugias or even just any damaged Pokemon, like Lugia, the Lost Box decks really are really struggling to deal with Collapsed. It's having a massive impact on what these decks are doing. So the way this deck is trying to beat that and get around that is with this Rayquaza. Has the one-shot potential. So yeah, you're not reliant on hoping your opponent isn't able to find the pieces to collapse away their big damaged Pokemon. You just take him out in the first hit. You can Rayquaza once or twice with this deck, I feel like. And also, yeah, the Raikou to just get ahead, get in the race against the Lugia, and then once you're ahead, use your one prize Pokemon. So if the Raikou can trade, two prize for two prize, that's perfect. And you can just stay ahead by going with the Rayquaza and using the Raikou to sort of speed up the game, so that you're not the one running out of resources before them. Because one thing about Lugia is in a matchup that isn't super resource intensive, like a control matchup, for example, they're going to run out of resources. But in a matchup like this, they're not running out of resources as fast as you are because you have the Lost Zone cards. You have to have all your Mirage Gates, have your Raihan, have your Ordinary Rods. So yeah, accelerating the game with Raikou is something that Lost Box decks are trying to do, and sort of just accelerate the game in general. You just want to make the game go fast. Use Rayquaza to nuke something. You can use the Amazing Rare Raikou as well. That's something that some decks have been playing. To do basically the exact same thing. Now, using Rayquaza is really hard to use. Raikou is really hard to use because look at the energy count in this deck. 2 fighting, 2 psychic, 2 lightning, 2 grass. It's pretty interesting, but yeah, I think this is actually a really effective way to counter Lugia, is just to go in hard and fast. Now the next deck we're going to talk about is Regi's. This is a Regi list, and the thing is with Regi's, it hasn't really changed. Nothing has really changed. The Serenas, you gotta play some Serenas so that you can play around your opponent, but you're really just hoping they're not running those Dunsparce, those Manaphy's, and not respecting Regi's. Like maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't. Regi's is an okay deck right now, not like the perfect deck, but it's pretty good. Yeah, so if you can run those Serenas, even if they're running like one of the Dunsparce or the Manaphy, you can still, Serena up Lugias, play around sort of them making an awkward prize trade. And so, yeah, while, Serena isn't as bad for making your deck as inconsistent, so Serena definitely a good option. You don't have to run boss, just Serenas should usually be okay. So that's what I would say about Regi's. Arceus Duraludon is another way to counter Lugia. This is actually one of the more effective ways I've found. Lugia lists are having to respect this with high lost vacuum counts so they can discard the Parasol and use their Yveltal. But if they're not respecting it, the Duraludon can fully lock them out. And the thing about Duraludon is it's not just a full control strategy. You are dealing damage. and you are going really fast, like you're actually like putting pressure on them, making them hit their lost vacuums fast. And it's actually, what I found with Lugia is it's quite hard to use Yveltal in most of your matchups. So having to, being forced to use it in this matchup, possibly even twice. Well, you can't use it twice. So if you can get set up two Duraludons, they're not running Echoing Horn, you sort of can run them over. Um, it really just depends on their build, but I think Arceus Duraludon is one of the decks that has a really, really good shot against Lugia, and I think countering Lugia by playing Arceus Duraludon is a good strategy. Now, the next deck we have is Kyurem, and like I talked about sort of with Giratina, is this is a deck that tries to race Lugia. Now, it can one-shot like pretty well compared to the rest of the decks. 4 energies off your Kyurem isn't a lot, even to get through a V-Guard energy, but even without that, you got the temples, so you only need 3 energies and a choice belt. You can sometimes kill them with Palkia if they're overbenched. So you sort of have a range of options to deal with their threats, sort of. You can even, start to use Radiant Greninja, get that in there. And the temple also blocking their powerful energies is really important. Just to give yourself more odds that your Kyurem survives, because they can use all 4 power energies to kill Kyurem, which basically just spells game over at that point if they actually can pull that off with the 4 powerful energies. So increasing your odds of that not happening is really important. So yeah, running the temple, but for the most part, running a standard Kyurem list to try and beat Lugia. Definitely a good strategy. I think Lugia is still going to be favored into this regardless. You sort of have to be going fast and using temple to sort of stop them from maybe gusting around. Make them hit the extra piece, instead of all of them having to have in their hand is, Serena and the Lugia evolution on turn 2 to to get the gust and knock out like a Crobat or something. They also have to hit the stadium bump, which can be an issue for them. Especially, yeah, if they want to use a Serena to gust, they're not drawing, which makes Temple all that much stronger. So that's what I would say about Kyurem. And now on to the final like important deck here. I'm gonna get into the final like tech deck I'm gonna get into is Palkia. Now Palkia is having a really hard time beating Lugia. It is very, very tough. But here's a list that I think tries to do the best of it. It's gonna be a Path Temple Rare Candy list without 4 VIP buffs. Now I have hated these lists, but I feel like this is something that could get through it. This is from an online tournament. This is something that did well, and I think maybe using the Inteleon more than you usually were to try and now. It is an issue that you're not going to get enough basics on turn 1, and that might snowball into the rest of the game. But if you can, like, you sort of have to draw well to do well in the matchup. I feel like, because yeah, Palkia is so rough against them. The temple just feels like it does nothing. So yeah, with this deck, like, you can use Intel. You can attack with it. You can take down their one prizes so that you're not in such a bad trade in the late game, because it feels like you're just playing such an uphill battle against Yveltal and Radiant Zard in the late game with Palkia. Even if you could get through the V Guard energies in the early game, and you're using your temple, just a one-off card, just to get through their V-Guard energy on one turn. Take one big knockout. That's all you need to focus on. And then after that, you can, yeah, try and outtrade their one prizes. It's still going to be really rough, I'd say, but getting the first attack in, getting a kill on a Lugia might just be enough in this matchup to take it. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was this Vikavolt deck. And I wanted to talk about especially because it's a lightning deck, and I don't think it counters Lugia very well. Lugia, I mean, if they're running Dunsparce, this deck is just terrible against Lugia. Like, you have Vikavolt, and sometimes you can lock them before they get Aerodactyl, not Aerodactyls, Archeops into their discard. But if you can't, your deck is so much worse against theirs. If they can get some, like, actually get their things into the discard, and especially if they can get Dunsparce down, like, they just run over your Vikavolts before you can do anything at all. And I think, like, running Temple, running this stuff, it's just such like a it's such like a weak attempt to beat Lugia, and like Temple shutting off your speed energies, it's not that synergistic with this deck. There's one heavy ball that's in the bottom left if you're curious. But yeah, I don't think this deck even though it is a lightning deck and it is kind of designed to counter Lugia, it's not doing that great of a job. So this would be one deck that I would avoid personally. The item block can be strong, it can definitely get you wins, but maybe not against Lugia. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about was some other techs that you can play that don't really have a spot in decks yet, but I think that in the future there could be a way for them to find their way into decks to the point where yeah, they're actually like making an effect. So I think that the first thing to talk about is some sort of control archetype with the Eveltal. The discard 3 special energies could be good because it is very easy to design a deck to beat Lugia with this archetype in mind and with these with Eveltal in mind. Like, Lugia already burns, if you play the deck, it burns through special energies at the speed of light on its own. And so if you have Lugia and Flannery and Crushing, if you have tools like that to discard their special energies, they are going to have a massive uphill battle at, like, actually attacking, 6 times to win the game. Or even if you're playing V Pokemon 5 or 4 times, they can't even do that if you just got an Eveltal trucking. I've seen control lists so far with 4 Eveltals, which is definitely going to be hard to beat for Lugia. You just got to work out the rest of your issues, but if you're trying to just beat Lugia, that is one of the places I'd start. And another one I wanted to talk about was Wheezing Aerodactyl. This has to also be in sort of a control archetype, but it's sort of a different strategy. And this is sort of just preying on one of the weaknesses of Archeops is that um, it needs abilities. So the Wheezing shuts off abilities, the Aerodactyl also shuts off abilities. If you go first, you can get the Aerodactyl on turn 2, and this deck is fully dysfunctional. If you get Wheezing, they can Serena or Boss around it. If you have other Pokemon on your bench like Crobat, if that's what you're playing. But yeah, I think there's definitely a strategy there that could beat Lugia. So that'll be it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Just went over things of how some decks beat Lugia. So if you like the content, drop a comment, drop a like, drop a sub if you like this sort of idea, or if you have any ideas for videos you want for me to do in the future, I'm happy to take them. This one was straight out of a YouTube comment. So, yeah. Anyways, see you guys next video.